at Mega Projects, we like to talk about engineering projects that are pretty damn mega. It's right there in the title. A couple of months ago, we did a video about the construction of the Moscow Metro, a triumph of the Soviet Union. That was more than a couple of months ago because I'm very slow. Today we're going to talk about a much different metro system, also built by a communist nation and also a triumph in its own right, but for a rather different reason. Beneath Shanghai is the world's largest subway system, which transports more people daily than any other. And astonishingly, it didn't even exist 30 years ago. As the backbone of the largest city in China, this metro is perhaps a perfect example of how utterly ridiculous China's construction boom has become. And today, we're going to talk about how they did it. Plans for a subway system under Shanghai were first floated as early as the 1950s, but thanks to a general lack of public funds and manpower at the time, it was a dubious proposition at best. It wasn't until Deng Xiaoping enacted his radical economic and cultural reforms that China would begin taking shape as the world superpower that it is today. In 1986, Shanghai began investigating the possibility of building a subway, and later that year, the subway plans were approved and finalized, and after 7 years, the first line opened to the public in 1993. With only 12 stations, its purpose was primarily as a proof of concept. However, even this small line exceeded expectations, serving an average of 600,000 people a day in the first year alone. To put that into some perspective, the busiest line on the London Underground served an average of 225,000 daily riders in 2017, the busiest one in London. As the new millennium dawned, China approved something known as the Master Plan of the Shanghai Metro region from 1999 to 2020. Within this wordily titled document, they set out their intentions to build a subway network made up of 780 kilometers, that's 485 miles of rail, 63% of which would be in tunnels. Just imagine if the US Congress were to announce tomorrow that they were going to build an entire subway network for the city of Houston, and they were going to do it in 20 years or less. You'd probably be just a little bit skeptical about it. But now imagine that they said they were going to do it for a city 12 times the size of Houston and still do it in that 20-year time frame, because that is the kind of scale we're talking about when we talk about the Shanghai Metro. Today, I want to tell you about our fantastic sponsor, which is NordPass. NordPass is the ultimate cybersecurity sidekick. Now you might be wondering, well, what is NordPass all about, Simon? Well, it's like a secret vault that keeps all of your passwords in one safe place. No more memorizing crazy combinations. NordPass saves you time by logging you in faster. No more endless typing, looking for the different keys with the hashtag and the @ symbol, all of that stuff. Plus, it generates super secure passwords that even a genius hacker would scratch their head at. Oh, and online shopping just got a whole lot safer. NordPass lets you securely store your credit card and personal details so you can shop without worrying about cyber criminals. Plus, you can use the same account on up to 6 devices. But there's more. NordPass has a data breach scanner, and it checks to see if any of your online accounts or credit card information has been leaked. It's like having your own digital detective. And let's not forget about password health. It's like having a personal trainer for your passwords. It tells you if they're weak, too old, or being used across multiple accounts. I know what you're thinking. Is my information really safe with NordPass? And the answer is absolutely. They have a zero-knowledge password manager, which means no one can see what's in your encrypted vault except for you, not even the team over at NordPass. So here's the deal. NordPass wants to give you exclusive access to their best offer. Just head over to nordpass.com/megaprojects or use the code megaprojects at checkout to get an additional 1 month for free. Thank you to NordPass for sponsoring today's video, and now back to it. In September 1999, Shanghai's second metro line entered operations. 15 months later, in December 2000, the third line opened, as well as the construction beginning on further extensions for the second line, bringing the total length of the system so far to 63 kilometers or 39 miles with 48 separate stations. By the time 2003 came around, just 10 years after the first line opened, the city was already operating a moderately sized public transport network, most of which had been built in the last 3 years. And just for another reference here, the London Underground's New Elizabeth line took 13 years to build 42 kilometers kilometers or 26 miles of tunnels. Shanghai's third line took less than a year and comprised 27 kilometers or 16 miles of tunnels. Less than a year. It was in that year that Shanghai was selected to host the 2010 World Expo, and where most cities might, open a nice exhibition center and maybe implement a new bus route, Shanghai decided that they would just have most of their subway system, around 400 of the 488 total kilometers, built by 2010 rather than 2020. By now, they had approximately 80 kilometers of tunnels in operations, with more under construction. The goal was to construct 320 kilometers, that's 200 miles of stations, rails, tunnels, and all of the accompanying infrastructure in just 7 years. And, well, that's exactly what they did. By April of 2010, Shanghai's subway length had reached a total of 403 kilometers. Between 2003 and 2010, the Shanghai municipal government had opened subway lines 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11, as well as carrying out extensions on the first 3 lines. Incidentally, at the opening of the 10th line on the 10th of April 2010, Shanghai also took the title of the largest metro system in the world, meaning that, over the course of only 15 years, the Shanghai subway had gone from not existing to the largest in the world, and they weren't even done yet. Following the 2010 Expo, building continued at a ferocious rate, albeit slightly reduced from the preceding years. As of 2023, the system is made up of 18 separate lines, totaling 802 kilometers of rail, or just under 500 miles and 506 stations. In 2017, further plans were released for a second master plan from 2017 to 2035, in which they stated their intentions to add an additional 8 new lines, bringing the total distance of the system up to 1,154 kilometers, or 717 miles. And, well, if their past record is anything to go by, they'll have probably completed this plan by the end of this year. Now, we should say that the title of longest metro system in the world is not one that anybody is actually competing for, and even if they were, it's a bit of a one-sided battle. Currently, 9 of the 10 longest systems in the world are based in China, with that one exception being the Moscow metro that we talked about previously. But returning to the question at hand, how did they do it? And more to the point, how did they do it so bloody quickly? Predictably, there's not a lot of information about this particular topic, and even in a more forthright country, it would still be a pretty niche area of interest. But based on a variety of factors, such as the makeup of the soil under Shanghai, the various patterns owned by the Chinese railway group, and several reliable sources, we can make an educated guess about their chosen methods for the construction of such a vast network of tunnels. And for what we can tell, they likely use something called the New Australian Tunnelling Method. According to the Chinese railway group, their preferred method of constructing rail tunnels is to implement a production line approach. This in itself isn't exceptional, being a pretty standard practice across the industry. However, China, in true modern Chinese fashion, have turned it up to 11. They began with a boring machine, so named because it's great at making tunnels and is also very boring to talk about, so let's move on. Attached to the back of the boring machine are a series of carriages, each contributing a certain layer of construction to the tunnel. This continues until the final carriage moves off, leaving behind a mostly completed metro tunnel in its wake. This process is similar to a production line that adds components to a car frame until it's a completed vehicle that emerges at the end. Although we couldn't find many specifics about the order and functions of each carriage in the tunneling train, we can, again, make some educated guesses. The boring machine starts the process by breaking up the dirt and rocks before transporting them to the surface on a system of conveyor belts. Next, reinforcements are added to secure the tunnel in the form of a lattice of steel rebars. This lattice is then surrounded by shotcrete, a type of concrete that can be shot, though a more accurate term would be sprayed, at very high velocity onto any surface regardless of its orientation, and solidify into any desired shape without slumping or sagging, making it ideal for tunnel walls and ceilings. After curing, a carriage for laying the rails is added, and then the tunneling train moves on. Finally, various workers follow, installing wiring, lighting, and anything else needed to make the tunnel functional. So outside of the groundbreaking feat of building the world's largest metro system in only 15 years, the Shanghai subway also has another title under its belt, that being the first rail system in the world to incorporate a Maglev line into its operations all the way back in January 2004. For those who aren't familiar, maglev is a contraction of the words magnetic levitation and describes a type of train that uses, you guessed it, magnetic levitation as an alternative to conventional rails and wheels. The maglev train is by far the fastest type of train currently achievable, and is also the most expensive. Due to its prohibitive cost and complexity, very few nations have attempted to build one, even in 2023. However, China, with its seemingly endless budget for infrastructure projects, took on the challenge and started construction of a maglev line in March 2001 under the name Shanghai Transrapid Project. Now, this being the first time China had worked with maglev technology, they outsourced much of the process to European companies that had already developed several models of maglev train. The primary contractors for the project were German companies Siemens and ThyssenKrupp, who had already been working on the Berlin maglev monorail for many years at this point. The construction was completed in only 21 months, and testing began in December of 2002. In 2003, during these tests, China set the train speed record of 311 miles per hour, and several months later, in January 2004, the Shanghai maglev line ran its first public service. This 30-kilometer single-track service primarily acts as a connection between Shanghai Pudong International Airport and Longyang Road Station, where passengers can alight onto various Shanghai subway services. The journey takes roughly 7.5 minutes to complete, in which the train barely has time to reach its top speed of 268 miles per hour before it begins to slow down again. So, it's by no means a long journey, even by regular train standards, which does beg the question, well, why go to all of the extra effort? Well, it's believed that China saw this as a trial run for a new and extensive maglev rail network that was going to connect the major Chinese coastal cities. Now, this would be an amazing topic to cover if it existed, which it doesn't. That's not to say that the Shanghai maglev project was a failure. It's still the longest operating commercial maglev service in the world, and China has actually built 2 more lines in Beijing and Changsha. More likely, the reason such an extensive network wasn't implemented has something to do with the $1.3 billion price tag that comes along with building that single 30-kilometer piece of track, which is just a little too pricey, apparently, even for the Chinese infrastructure budget. Essentially, when you consider a more conventional high-speed rail track would cost about $800 million less to build and would only have added about 5 or 6 minutes to the total travel time, it just doesn't seem that worthwhile. And there we have it. The Shanghai subway. Whether you agree with authoritarian governments as a concept or not, you can't deny that they do get results. Far be it for this small corner of the internet to start commenting on the merits of various national regimes, but it is interesting to consider the fact that there seems to be a trade-off between a government's productivity and the civil liberties that one receives from said government. It may just be an example of correlation, not causation, but it's still interesting. As for the operations of the system itself, it has the highest ridership of any metro system in the world, averaging 10.63 million daily riders and setting a record of 13.29 million riders in a single day on March the 8th, 2019. Bearing that in mind, you'd expect at least some shortcomings in the running of the trains, but no. As reported by the Shanghai Subway's official website, the service ran with a 99.63% on-time departure rate in 2020. Much like the Moscow Metro, the trains run every 3 to 5 minutes as opposed to specifically scheduled times like most others. According to online reviews, the stations are clean, well-tended, and easy to navigate, even if you don't speak the language. As for cost, a ticket in Shanghai will cost you the equivalent of 30 cents, while in New York it would cost you about $2.75. And in London, the equivalent of $7.40, because as with many things British, we did it first and now we're at it. And look, I know we spent a lot of time ragging on British Rail in this episode and on this channel, and we've upset some people, but just understand that if they didn't really want to be made fun of, they wouldn't make it so easy. Putting all that to one side, though, I think we could appreciate the value of what was achieved in this project. For a citizen going about their day-to-day life, it might not have made a huge impact, perhaps adding some convenience to almost 11 million people who ride it daily. However, on a macro level, the economic growth that has been facilitated by the project will have dramatically improved the general quality of life for everyone in the area. Better housing, better childcare, better education are among many other consequences, and I think that's an outcome that we can all get behind. Thanks for watching. Just before we wrap things up today, I do want to give a special shout out to our amazing sponsor, NordPass. Remember, they are the security sidekick that you need in your life. If you're tired of juggling a million passwords and want to keep your online life secure, NordPass has your back. Go to nordpass.com/megaprojects or use the link below for 1 month for free. And thank you for watching.